I'm going to talk briefly because I know I'm standing between you and a Friday night drink, and things are running late. I'll give you a quick few moments that were, for me, defining in my life. Firstly, when I was 18, I was at university. I was all set to become a doctor, studying medicine at Oxford. As students want, I was having parties in my college rooms, which were getting somewhat out of control, and the Dean of Discipline there said that if I carried on holding these parties, I would be sent down. So my friend and I came up with the idea of using the local nightclub to hold our parties, and he came up with the idea of charging on the door. And suddenly our parties turned into a business, and I was 18 at the time. And the defining moment for me was on the very first night. I arrived 20 minutes early, and there was already a big queue of people who bought into this idea of ours of a club and a business. And I realized then that what I wanted to spend my life doing was not treating sick people, but trying to build businesses and run them. Another defining moment for me was when I was 30. I'd been working for myself for 2 years, living off an overdraft, unsuccessfully struggling through the last deep recession in the early 90s, and a wonderful but relatively small business at the time called Pizza Express came up for sale, and my partner, the same guy, and I wanted to buy it. And even though we had no money, somehow or other, against competition, we convinced the then owners to let us take control of it. And over the next 10 years, we grew that business tenfold, and it transformed my life. It's not always been like that, obviously. Another lesson certainly was much more recently, a few years ago. I fell in love with the idea of buying a big bookshop chain called Borders, and I thought it looked a very cheap opportunity. It was a business that I could buy for a few % of annual turnover. I could buy it for less than the annual profits it had been making 2 years prior, a tiny fraction of its tangible book worth. But unfortunately, what I hadn't properly taken account of is that when an industry like bookselling is undergoing such profound changes, you are like Canute trying to fight the tide. And that was a very painful and expensive lesson, and I will certainly not get involved with another business like that. And I think it is very tragic for the bookshop world, but I think given particularly the incredible growth of e-books now, let alone the success of Amazon and the supermarkets, I think as commercial entities, the medium long-term future for bookshops is pretty bleak, I'm afraid. Perhaps more successfully, in a few years back, I was looking for ideas of fragmented businesses to get involved with, and I was flicking through the yellow pages, and I came across in the D bit dentists, and I thought to myself, you know, all the dentists I've ever known have always driven Rolls Royces. Must be quite a good industry to be in. So I inquired, and I found that there was only one group of dentists in the country. All the others were singly owned, really. This was in Liverpool. And so I forged a partnership with that dentist, and we grew that business over 10 years. And although I've now stepped back from it, it's the largest of its kind in the country, and merged with its main rival earlier this year, and is now a £500 million business. So I've spent the last quarter of a century working with entrepreneurs and attempting to be one. And I think that really part of the reason I do what I do is because the company of entrepreneurs and partnering with them is incredibly stimulating. They are, by nature, very difficult, often obsessive. Broadly, they are perverse by nature, often charismatic, unreasonable people, overconfident often, optimists, always hungry, restless. But ultimately, the ones that succeed are pragmatic. And they're certainly, in terms of their temperament, gritty by nature, because I think failure is part of the package. And I doubt there's an entrepreneur alive who's done well, who hasn't had plenty of setbacks. And I think I'm encouraged to see that much more than ever before in this country, people who have achieved something are much more willing to talk about their disasters from the past, because mistakes and errors and failures are inevitable. And if we aren't willing to risk having those and experiment, then we will never progress. I've written this book recently called Start It Up, which is about these sort of subjects for both people who run a business or are thinking of running a business. The best thing that happened to me today was I saw a colleague of mine who's just left a business I work with. You know, there were personal issues, whatever. And I convinced her that what she should now do is turn what she's doing into her own business. And she just sent me an email about half an hour ago saying, okay, I'm going to do that now. So she's gone and become another entrepreneur to enjoy the freedom and the independence and the idea that perhaps you control your destiny rather more than you might otherwise. I think the single most important message I would leave you with in terms of where we sit right now is, when I chaired Channel 4, I used to complain at ITN who made our news, why is the news always so bad? And they would always say to me, well, it sells newspapers, it sells what we do. And I think in an era of 24-hour rolling channels and more outlets for news than ever before, the pressure to have the most disastrous headline is ever greater. But the truth is that if you study the long run, and you know, my father's an historian and points this out, in the long run, the optimists are always the victors. And by their nature, obviously, you need to be an optimist if you're to start or buy a business. But there is no mileage in being the cynic there who always says this will never work, or don't be silly, or it's not worth it, or play it safe, or whatever it is. History forgets those people. And it's the bold thinkers who don't want to wake up at the age of 50 or whatever it is at 4 a.m. and say, I could have done something more interesting. And so for any of those of you who are thinking of striking out on your own, my message is, despite the macroeconomic view, I would go for it. What really matters is your microeconomy, your attitude, and virtually every business success throughout history, I'm quite convinced, has taken place overall, not because it's been a booming economy and it's a rising tide. It's been because that individual, that operation, that idea has proved exceptional. And in a way, there are lots of advantages to starting right now when things might feel a bit challenging. Jobs for life, final salary pension schemes, all these sort of putative safety aspects of being an employee history, frankly. So actually the downsides of becoming freelance or starting or buying a business are not as great as they used to be, in my opinion. So obviously I'm biased, but for me it was easily the best decision I think I ever made in working for myself and getting involved in entrepreneurship generally. And whether it be a social entrepreneur or for-profit entrepreneur, starting things, building things of your own where you get the credit and you can take pride of ownership, I think it's worth the grief. Anyhow, I think that's the message. Thank you very much.